How's everybody doing today? Good? Good to hear. Very happy to be here. And it's funny to me because doing these things reminds me a lot of that old MasterCard advertisement that used to be on TV. You know, that where it said something along the lines of ticket to the game ball, or is a ticket to the ball game, $75. A ticket or a hot dog at the ball game, $8. Spending time with your son, priceless. Well, this is what it feels like to me here. Because for me, studying Spiritism and studying the gospel takes X amount of time. Reading about it, digesting it, reflecting upon it takes Y amount of time. But coming here and sharing the message with you, to me, is priceless. And that's why I'm so happy to do this, and I thank you all very much for your attention today. And I'd like to share with you today a very special word. One word that reigns supreme in all of creation. It is the fundamental word whereupon everything is built in the universe and the cosmos. This word, if put into the form of a pill, would encapsulate all the minerals and vitamins we need in order to live a healthy and happy life. And this word, because it comes and it originates from the one source, the Father in heaven, it becomes a word that encapsulates the cosmos. So it is this immense, infinite pill that encapsulates the cosmos, and within it are all of those vitamins and minerals that nourishes all of creation. So because this word is in the cosmos, and because this word is not just a word that lies dormant and does not move, it is a word that is continuously active and in action, it becomes a verb. It is a word that propels everyone to progress. And that's why this word is none other than love. And love is the cosmic verb. Now, how can we visualize the word love? It is difficult for us in this world, in our current state of existence, to properly define love as something that we can't yet quite comprehend completely. We have our love here in the world and on earth, in our relationships with our family members, in our relationships with our loved ones, etc., etc. But there is a greater love, a love that is undefinable. And because we are limited in our faculties, we cannot envision this love. So we have to use sometimes crude analogies to define this love. And this is what I want to do with you today. I want to provide a crude analogy of what this love could be. And what I would like you to do is imagine this great river. This river that encompasses the cosmos. Like any other river, it has a source, it has a spring whence it begins. And this river begins at the one source, the one spring. That spring being God. There, in that part of the river of love, this cosmic river, is where the purest water is found. The purest form of the love, of this love, is found. And then this river channels itself throughout eternity, creating this immense network of systems, tributaries, smaller rivers that leave from this larger river and return to this larger river. And these smaller rivers, they feed onto circumscribed temporal places. In other words, planets, material places, Earth or Jupiter or any other planet, the infinite amount of planets that are on the universe. These rivers feed and nourish the planets with this love that originates from the Heavenly Father. But the problem is that, unfortunately, on Earth, at least in this world, we often build these dams that block rivers. They block the current and the flow of this love, and it doesn't allow it to penetrate the valleys of our lives. And what happens when we dam up these rivers? Now, it is another analogy within an analogy, because once we dam up these rivers, basically we are saying that once we incarnate on earth in our physical bodies, we forget our true purpose, our true essence, why we are here. We are here to learn and to progress. And we forget this. And we focus only on that which is temporal, that which is part of this earth, the things that we try to acquire while here on earth. And we forget that we need to allow this river to flow through us as well. So what happens? We dam these rivers, and the valley that once flourished becomes dry, arid, like a desert. And then we walk through this valley trying to find something to drink, thirsty, trying to find something. We dig wells, dig them very deep and deep and deep and deep, and we don't find anything. We try to quench our thirst for this river of love with the temporal glasses of water of this earth. And what happens? We drink it. Yes, it quenches our thirst temporarily. Because soon after, we're thirsty again. And what happens? You require a larger amount of water, a bigger glass, a bigger pitcher, and so on and so forth. I hope you guys are following me with the analogy. So then God in his infinite wisdom sends an envoy to earth, someone that will help channel and guide the water, the river, back onto this valley, whereupon now everything is dried up and everything is a desert. So here comes our Christ, Jesus, this purified spirit that's traversed all of the journeys that we are yet to traverse, and then some, knowing all of the lessons and knowing everything that he needs to know in order to teach us the true essence of love. He comes to earth, incarnates here, and begins to open the floodgates of this dam that we built here in humanity. And slowly but surely the water runs through the dam, and it trickles through this once arid and deserted valley. And slowly a little tree blossoms, flowers blossom, but very slowly. It isn't a quick process. It's something that takes generation after generation after generation. And we can imagine this process in another analogy within this analogy, which is of a canal. In the Panama Canal, there is a system of locks. If a boat wants to go from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, or the Caribbean, I think it's the Atlantic Ocean, it has to go through the Panama Canal, or it can choose to go around South America. But when it goes through the Panama Canal, there's a system of locks. In other words, the ship comes into the first gate, the first system of locks, and the water slowly fills up until that water is at the same level as the other gate. And once that water reaches the same level as the other gate, then the ship is prepared to move as the gate opens into that next level. And so on and so forth until that ship that was once in the other ocean reintegrates itself into the other ocean of life. And this is what I'm trying to exemplify here with this analogy, is that through every generation, it takes a lot of time. And we're not ready at once to learn everything. It takes the systematic process of locks, of generation after generation, to learn these new things so that we can further understand, comprehend what true love is. What is this love that flows through everything, through eternity? What is it? We don't understand it. We catch a glimpse of it sometimes, but we don't quite grasp it. And Allan Kardec, in his wisdom, there is an essay or a passage in the book Genesis entitled Providence. And in that passage, he uses this similar allegory to describe God. And I can translate this analogy as being God in such a way that we may understand what God truly is. Because if we comprehend him as this fluid, this river of love that permeates throughout eternity, penetrates everything, and nourishes everyone, we understand that this is how he knows what happens everywhere at once, what everyone is thinking, what everyone is feeling. And then Kardec alludes to this and says the following in Genesis. Let us imagine a fluid subtle enough to penetrate all objects. Being unintelligent, this fluid acts mechanically by material forces alone. However, if we imagine this fluid to be endowed with intelligence, perception, and sensitivity, it no longer acts blindly, but with discernment, will, and freedom. It sees, understands, and feels. This is a way for us to crudely imagine and understand God, because we are so limited in our faculties, we can't truly comprehend his exact essence. And the Lebanese poet Gibran, Khalil Gibran, brings us a small poem that will encapsulate what I've just explained here, where he says the following, and this is found in the Little Book of Love. It is based on the Thoughts and Meditations, which is another book of his, and it says, "But now love has become a halo whose beginning is its end and whose end is its beginning." In other words, it never ends. It's a constant flow. This river goes round and round. It comes from the source, from God, and it returns to the source. It never stops. It's a current, a flow, an incessant flow. It surrounds every being, what I've just explained here, and extends slowly to embrace all that shall be. It's a beautiful passage, and I highly recommend reading the works of Khalil Gibran because he is truly an enlightened spirit that was alive among us during the Ottoman Empire, and he really, to me, in my opinion, was one of the humans who incarnated here who best described what true love is. And so we can further this analogy and figure out how love connects us all and where does love come from and how does it transfer to creation, to the creatures of creation. So we have at the very top, we have God, where this love originates, this feeling, this purity, the source, the spring of that river. Because the river, as it channels through eternity, it catches sediments, detritus, materials as it courses through the obstacles of eternity. But within that river, we still find the remnant of the purity of that love. We just have to search for it. And it's still there in that water. Within the molecule of that river of love, we still find the divine love, the origin of that love. So then God creates in his image spirits, divine sparks that are first simple and ignorant. And throughout their existences, they begin to develop and awaken within them the intelligence to be able to discern things. And once they do this, they begin to have experiences such as reincarnations or incarnations with the spirit, whereby the spirit incarnates, or the spirit, this essence of love, because if God is all loving, infinite love, then we are small portions of that infinite love. And now that small portion of love buries itself on earth, within a human body, within the envelope, and it incarnates here. But the problem that often happens is, once we incarnate here, we forget that we are a portion of this pure love, that we are a portion of the divine love. And we get too carried away with the temporality, or not the temporality, but the immediacy of our needs, of our necessities here on earth. We forget, we deviate from our path. We deviate from that river of love. We don't let our ships of life, let the current of love push it. We instead try to direct the ship on another path. We don't anchor our ship in faith and in love. We instead try to steer it in some other direction. And so we disconnect, and we become, the spirit becomes bereft of its faculties. It becomes so deeply entrenched in the earthly passions that it loses its essence. And the only way it can regain its essence, the only way it can reintegrate with the ocean of love, which is earth, the only way it can do this is by succumbing itself to several existences through a process of purification through reincarnations. But because humanity can't do this by itself, it does need someone to guide them. Jesus, as the spirits tell us, is our guide and model here on earth. He comes and incarnates into a human body on earth, suffers all of the trials and expiations that we suffer as well. Imagine a spirit whose essence is so sublime, so pure, that it took centuries for him to actually be able to become small enough to incarnate on earth. And he comes here and blesses us with his presence in order for him to plant the seed of love, the gospel of love, the gospel which I come here every Monday and talk about. It's so important to read the gospel. It's so important to study it. Because we can read it, and if we take it literally, we don't understand it. Because Jesus he utilized the expressions and languages and customs of that era. That's why if we just read the passages, we don't comprehend it. We don't digest it. We cannot put it into use because how am I going to do this? There's no way I can. Well, if you read through the superficiality of the expressions, of the customs of those days, of that era, there is so much meaning in there because we still have not been able to grasp the entire teaching that Christ left us. We haven't. We've just begun to skim through the surface. It's like that river of love, because it's come through earth, through the several existences, acquired so much sedimentation and dirt that one has to sift through it to find the little gold nuggets. This is what it's like to study the gospel. You have to bring that big, I forget the name of the thing that they use to sift through the water, but you have to bring that big equipment through, let the water flow through the equipment, and so you can finally focus on it and see if you can sift through it and find these little gold nuggets. It's so important to do this because it brings so much light to our lives. When we study the gospel, when we understand it, and more importantly, or most importantly, when we apply it to our lives, then we're no longer bereft of our spiritual faculties. We re-embrace them because we take that journey down the river and reintegrate ourselves with divinity, with love. So he comes here and he plants the seed of love. And once again, through moral and intellectual evolution, through the subsequent reincarnations, the spirit builds and develops and learns to humble itself before the immensity of creation, learns that he is here to graduate from this school. No one likes to be left behind. How many people like to stay in the same grade for many years, looking like they're 30 while they're in high school? No one likes to do that. They start to feel ashamed. And this is what happens here on earth. You incarnate in a life, and you're stubborn. You don't want to listen to that connection with divinity. You don't want to listen and allow your ship of life to be pushed by the flow and the current of that river of love. You instead want to steer that ship yourself. And you get lost on the path. We get lost. So we need to redirect ourselves so that we may then focus on the lesson and do the homework. Because it is by doing the homework in this life that we will learn the lesson, that we will truly learn the lesson, and then we'll get a good grade or a grade good enough to graduate and move on to the next stage. So through moral and intellectual evolution, the Spirit then, us, the little portions of love, of this great divine love, reintegrates itself with divinity. Again, alluding to that circle, that halo that Khalil Gibran talked about, the never-ending halo that just returns back to the source. We are created simple and ignorant, but we are divine sparks. We have everything we need within us. It takes us, through hard work, to awaken that inner castle, that inner Christ within us, the inner castle that Teresa d'Avila talked about so much in her work. We have to work and help others and love one another so that we can truly channel that river of love that flows through eternity. And Emmanuel, the Spirit Emmanuel, brings to us a passage from the book Pensamento e Vida, or Thoughts and Life, which is not translated into English. The last passage, passage number 30, entitled Love, he defines love and what it truly is. It's a beautiful passage, and if anyone has this book, it was psychographed by Chico Xavier. I recommend reading it. And in it, there's a small little paragraph that I think defines, more or less, explains what I've said here to you guys. And he says, love is the divine plasma with which God involves everything that is created. Love is his very breath penetrating the universe. This is, in my opinion, well, everything Emmanuel says is beautiful and sublime. But we see here that this divine plasma that sticks everything together, this clay that brings everyone together, that unites everyone together, this plasma is love. If you build a house with bricks, but you don't use mortar to unite those bricks, or cement, or some type of product or material, and a big problematic gust of wind comes through, what's going to happen to your house, to that brick wall you built? It's going to come apart. So what do we need to do? We need to use love to build this house. The mortar of love that unites those bricks and makes them so strong and resistant that no matter how strong a gust of problematic wind here on earth may be, it won't knock down the house. The big bad wolf won't knock down the house. You're safe at home because that house is now embraced by love, covered by the concrete of love. It has dried up, cemented itself in your life, and you live within a happy castle, because within that happy castle, the light of the Father shines so bright, and His love as well. And here, since we've spoken about Jesus so much, because He is fundamental when talking about love, you cannot talk about love and omit Jesus, because He is love on earth, the purest form of love we can sort of comprehend. And there are several passages where He explains love in different ways. And the first one that I want to share with you is from Matthew 25, 31 through 46. It is a parable of the Good Samaritan. And in this parable, I'm going to read it to you, so forgive me and bear with me here. It reads, "When the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, He will sit on His throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate the people from one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on His right and the goats on His left. Then the King will say to those on His right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer Him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' The King will reply, 'I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me.'" I think this passage is self-explanatory. And it goes on, "Then He will say to those on His left, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me.' They will also answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you?' And He will reply, 'I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me.'" So what does this mean? This means that we need to engage in fraternity and solidarity. We need to love one another. Because if Christ is the guide of humanity, He can't do all the work by Himself. He needs us to help Him. He can't lift humanity out of its current mire into the sublime stage of a humanity that loves one another. He can't do this. He needs you, each one of us, to help Him in this. And we can only help Him in this through awakening that inner love, through charity, through fraternity and solidarity. Because if He's the guide of humanity, all of us are His little brothers and sisters. He is the Son of God. We are sons and daughters of God. Which means that if you're helping anyone here on earth, you're helping Christ. Because if you're sharing your love with someone here on earth, you're sharing your love with Christ. And by doing this action, Christ is saying, you are helping me in my task. You are aiding me. You're being a steward of love. You're being a true servant. That's why it's so important that we engage in this type of action. Solidarity, fraternity, all of these words are simple, small fractions that define what true love is. A small percentage of it. And here we have the parable continued, and this is found in Luke 10:25 through 37, and it goes, "On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. And he said, 'Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?' 'What is written in the law?' Jesus replied. 'How do you read it?' And he answered, 'Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.' 'You have answered correctly,' Jesus replied. 'Do this, and you will live.' But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Who is our neighbor? And in reply, Jesus said, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side.' So here we see the religious figures, the ones that are supposed to engage in charity, at that time at least, not doing so. Because all they did was, they didn't observe the true love. They observed the ritualistic outward love of tradition, the dogmatic love. Where is that solidarity, the true fraternity with a brother, a fellow brother of humanity? Just because he doesn't follow your customs, he doesn't observe your traditions and laws, you can't help him? We are all brothers and sisters, no matter what color, what religion, what background we have. We all originate from the same source, from that spring of love, of this river that permeates eternity. And he continued, but a Samaritan, and a Samaritan then was considered a heretic. A heretic. This is why Jesus' teachings penetrated so far into the minds, into the psyche of the people of that era, because he was very audacious in his teachings. He wanted to truly penetrate and go deep within the recesses of the soul of each individual at that time to awaken that true connection and true love. So the Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' And then Jesus asked, 'Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?' I think we all can guess what the answer is. And the expert said, 'The one who had mercy on him.' And Jesus said, 'Go and do likewise.' In other words, forget embracing the temporal rituals and traditions and outward expressions of earth and embrace the true essence of love. Help one another. Love one another as I have loved you. That's what Jesus said in John 15:12. Let us engage in this true solidarity and fraternity and help one another. Because in doing so, as I had mentioned, we are helping Jesus in this great project that is the evolution of earth. He can't carry the weight on his back. He could, because he's that great of an essence. But he expects us, God expects us, to do our own work. We have the responsibility, we are charged with the task of progressing, of dealing with the obstacles that present themselves in our lives, because the obstacles that present themselves in our lives are nothing more than purifying agents. Sicknesses, financial problems, those are purifying agents that help us to progress. Because often we are distracted and we need to be called back, to come back to that river of love, to let God steer for a little bit so that we may awaken to what we truly need to do and not allow ourselves to be carried away by the earthly passions. And to continue on with these passages, the next one is found in Matthew 22:34 through 40, and it reads, Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, they were all experts in the law, but what kind of law? Not the true law. That law that no longer exists, that time destroys. Because the laws that are made by men are fallible. The laws written by the stroke of a pen in the hand of a man are done away with after time. And then you have other men who reincarnate with more enlightened thoughts, more enlightened understanding of life, and they pen new laws, and so on and so forth, in those progressive locks from the canal of existence, until finally we reach a point where the human law equates to the divine law, because that is the ultimate goal of humanity. That is our ultimate goal as spirits, to reintegrate ourselves with that whole, to become part of that halo that Khalil Gibran talked about. And it continues. So one of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." Because you have to love yourself in order to love God. Because if God created you in his image, you are a portion of God. And if you don't love yourself, you don't love God. You have to love yourself first. All of Jesus' teachings are based upon loving oneself, purifying oneself before attempting or even trying to help anyone else. Focusing on working on yourself, because we are powerless to control anyone else. We can barely control our own lives. Well, we don't control our own lives. How many times have we been presented with challenges in life that we thought, wow, I really didn't expect that. Never thought this would happen. Because if we don't tend to God, if we don't listen to his call through love, we're going to have to listen to it through pain. That is an invitation for us to walk back towards that path, for us to open our hearts to what we need to do here. And Jesus continued, this is the first and the greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And I don't know if you noticed, but I pasted the Samaritan's face on the other guy's face, so it kind of drives the point home. And here's a little comic, whatever. Anyway, so this is the passage concerning loving your brother as yourself. Why? Because your brother is you. You are your brother. Why? Because if we're all created equally, simple and ignorant, we all come from the same source. We're all a portion of the same source. It's like a pizza. It's a crude analogy, but think of a pizza. It's a pizza, and we're each a slice of this infinite pizza. If you remove a slice, it's not going to be a whole pizza anymore. Right? If you ruin one slice, what's going to happen to the pizza? It's not going to be a whole and entirely good pizza. If one slice gets moldy, what's going to happen? That mold is going to penetrate throughout the rest of the slices, and the pizza itself is going to become moldy and stinky and can't eat it anymore. Because since we are all interconnected, we need to love one another, to water that inner seed of love that exists within us, so that this seed may blossom into a flower, and its perfume may emanate from us and penetrate all of the environment that is around us, so that others may feel it. And once they feel it and they smell this scent, they think to themselves, man, I want that for myself. When we offer a helping hand, what are we doing? We're not helping just that person, we're helping ourselves. Because we are all in this together. If I don't help that person, yes, he might suffer, but I'm also going to suffer. Because if I'm not engaged in helping someone else, then eventually I'm going to suffer the consequence of that choice that I made. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in a future life, but eventually with the law of cause and effect, there will be an effect for that cause. We bring it upon ourselves. So let us extend a charitable hand of love to those that are around us, because by helping others, we are helping ourselves. By loving others, we are loving ourselves. And by doing so, we are loving Jesus. And by doing so, we are loving God. And this is the beautiful thing about this cosmic verb, because it's not just Earth. This applies to every planet of creation. Every planet that has humanoid creatures, as far as I know anyway, that may resemble us or any other creature that is in the process of evolution. Because God wants us all to reintegrate ourselves with Him. That is the goal. The universal goal is for all of us to continue to learn and continue to grow. And Allan Kardec summarizes this passage in a beautiful way. And this passage is also found in the Gospel explained by the Spiritist Doctrine in chapter 15. And he says, it isn't possible to truly love God without loving your neighbor. I just explained this. Or to love your neighbor without loving God. If your neighbor was created by God, and you love your God, why wouldn't you love your neighbor? You have to love your neighbor, because your neighbor is the Son of God. If humanity comprehended and understood all of this, if we took this to heart, all of the wars, all of the conflicts, all of the problems of the world would cease to exist. And he continues, thus, whatever you do against your neighbor, you do against God. The love of God assumes the practice of love toward our neighbor. All our human obligations can be summed up in this one maxim. Without love, there is no salvation. It's not the church, it's not the mosque, it's not the synagogue. It's love. It's not the outward observations of ritualistic traditions. It's not observing human laws. It is observing the law of God. Observing love. Letting love reign supreme within you. And that is the only way. And not salvation, because salvation is a rather dogmatic word, with a strong religious connotation. But love, I would say, without love, there is no liberation. Because once we learn to love, we free ourselves from the burdens of life. Our burden becomes light and our yoke becomes easy, just like Jesus said. He taught us. His yoke was easy and his burden was light. Why? Because he loved. No matter how difficult the situation, he loved. He loved. He was obedient to the laws of God. And because he was obedient to the laws of God and understood that the suffering and the trials he had to go through were needed, were necessary in order for him to set the example that he did, he never, ever complained. And this is what we need to do. We need to follow that example. And once again, it's no wonder he is our guide and model. And love is a beautiful thing, because if you've ever seen a woman or a man in love, what does everybody say? He's stupid, he's dumb, he's in love, he doesn't see anything anymore. He's got this love goggles on and he can't see clearly. All of the problems, all of the defects and flaws, he doesn't see it because he's in love. Why is that? Because once we put on the goggle of love, we no longer see flaws in others. Because we recognize that lesser brother, that brother who is still engaging in nefarious deeds, he one day will get there. All of us one day will get there. All of us one day will get to the level of a Christ. Yes, it'll take a long time and a lot of effort and a lot of work. I get tired just thinking about it. But we will get there one day. We will. So we need to love one another. And why is it that when somebody is in love, they're so happy? Why? They can't, nothing pushes them down, nothing gets them down. Because they've tapped into that cosmic river of love. They've reintegrated themselves. If we think about the word enthusiasm, when you're in love, you're enthusiastic about life. The origin of the word enthusiasm comes from Latin. And enthusiasm in Latin means being inspired by God. So when you're enthusiastic, you're inspired by God. When you're in love, you're enthusiastic. When you're in love, you're inspired by God. Because you reconnect, you reintegrate yourself in that halo that Khalil Gibran talked about. And what happens? Generation after generation, this love expands. It begins with a couple. It then turns into a family. And then the family grows. And you exchange, this constant exchange of love just continues and continues and continues until this halo of love expands and expands and expands until it embraces the entire planet, which is the ultimate goal. Until this halo of love will embrace the entire Earth, like the rings around Saturn, to make a physical analogy. And the Earth will then shine brightly, because it will be a true happy world, because everyone will love one another. They will be loving their neighbor as themselves. And to finalize, I bring to you once more another beautiful poem that, in my opinion, summarizes everything I've said here. And this poem is also by that wonderful Lebanese poet from the Ottoman Empire, Gibran Khalil Gibran. And he says the following. Now, the word not means nothing, in case anyone here doesn't know that. So I'll read this, I'll substitute the word not for nothing. Love gives nothing but itself and takes nothing but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed. For love is sufficient unto love. When you love, you should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And think not you can direct the course of love. You can't direct that giant river, that immense, infinite river of love. No one can, only God. For love, if it finds you worthy, if you open yourself up to it, it directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. And we have to remember that love, that cosmic verb, was the word that turned into flesh on John 1:14 when Jesus incarnated here. And we must always think of him and thank him for teaching us what true love is. And heed to his words when he said to us, love one another as I have loved you, in John 15:12. Thank you very much for your attention today. It's an honor to be here, because for me this is an exercise for my own learning. So I'm benefiting from this probably much more than you are. And I know that sometimes it can get drawn out and everything, but I do appreciate your attention. So thank you very much. May God bless us all forever and always. Thank you.